Everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the second half of our very first research rodeo at UBC Okanagan campus. Welcome to you all. I'm Dr. Bob Belton. I'm an associate professor in the art history program in the Faculty of Creative and Critical Studies, and I'm your MC for today's events. I welcome you all. This is Celebrate Research Week on campus, and the Research Rodeo is one of the key events helping us raise the profile of our researchers, celebrate the discovery and advancements they are making in the world of knowledge, in our knowledge of the world, and in mobilizing the transfer of that knowledge, and I couldn't be more excited. Welcome all of you. To say a few words about the research agenda here on this campus, I'd like to invite to the podium one of our distinguished jurors, our Provost and Vice Principal, Dr. Wesley Pugh. Dr. Pugh.
Thank you so much, Bob. I'm just delighted to be here. It's a pleasure for me as Provost in my first year to be with you today on Celebrate Research Week on this campus, with a special focus on the research being conducted by our undergraduate and our graduate students. Every great discovery, every great innovation begins with research. Whether it's basic investigation in the sciences, new breakthroughs in the humanities or the arts, or developing applied solutions to meet immediate needs, research is a central component of UBC's mandate as a public university. Over the past year alone, more than $10 million has been awarded to faculty and students on this campus, supporting more than 300 research initiatives. And we are just getting started. We are a brand new university campus. Today's competition, the Research Rodeo. People have been looking at me as I walk across campus wearing the hat. Today's competition, the Research Rodeo, is an exciting new feature of Research Week, and part of what is already becoming something of a student research tradition on this campus. This event is inspired by a similar competition called the 3-Minute Thesis, a concept that was drawn from an initiative launched by the University of Queensland in 2008 and has now spawned international challenges and competitions in 33 participating universities. We're part of a global network as we take on this seemingly bizarre enterprise of explaining complex ideas in 3 minutes. For our first Research Rodeo, we have created a smaller, modified event, but we hope to build on this in the future. We wish all of our competitors the very best as you struggle to express your ideas briefly, and congratulate you on your research and your willingness to share what you have learned with our community today, present in this room, and through UBC OTV forever after in the Ethernet. I'll now move back to the judging panel and turn things over to our MC, Dr. Bob Belton. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pugh. Dr. Pugh reminds me to mention that this is being streamed live on the internet and across campus on the monitors everywhere, so just don't sneeze too loudly, please. We're now ready to get going with the Research Rodeo. I feel like saying yee-haw from time to time, which is set up in two parts. Earlier this afternoon, we enjoyed presentations from 9 undergraduates sitting in the danger zone over here, and we selected 3 winners and a People's Choice winner. You will have the same opportunity in just a moment. In this competition, we have 12 graduate students who will make presentations about their research. That clock that you see over there will begin ticking. Each student has 3 minutes with just 1 slide to support their presentation. They could opt out of having a slide, but just 1 slide is the standard. Not all students have opted to use the slides, but all have unbounded enthusiasm for their research. In the interest of this streaming in perpetuity on the internet, we will show our appreciation, I hope. You'll see that they all have great knowledge and passion, and their intent today is to engage the judges, whom we have visiting us at the side here, and I'll introduce them in just a second, and you, by communicating their research to the best of their abilities within those 3 minutes. Let me introduce our judges for this afternoon. I begin with our celebrity judge. We're very grateful to Phil Johnson, host of AM 1150's early edition morning program. Phil, could you take a wave? Thank you very much for coming. And of course, you've met Dr. Pugh, Provost and Vice Principal. Thank you, Dr. Pugh, for coming. Our third judge, and the one I'm told that really breaks the tie, is Kirsten Kane, Manager of our Office of Research Services. Could you take a wave, please, Kirsten? Thank you very much. Our official timekeeper in the imposing red and white striped shirt is Kimberly Darling, Director of Academic Operations. Could you make a wave over there? She has a very, very important role to perform, which I'll describe in just a moment. Thank you all for agreeing to serve in these important roles. Now, there are rules in competitions. Here are ours. All participants are currently enrolled in degree programs here on the Okanagan campus. Each presentation is allowed one slide, no animation, no movies, no props are permitted. Presentations may be up to 3 minutes long, but no longer. You can finish earlier if you want. Just don't speak quickly like me. By the way, we are very grateful to the Kelowna Running Room for their use of this large clock for the competition. When I first saw it, I actually thought it was one of those things that counted your steps and you had to wear it on your waist, and I thought, well, no wonder these people are so fit. When the presentation reaches 2.5 minutes, our timekeeper, Kimberly Darling, will display this large caution sign. I want you to be aware of that in the corner of your eye, because that's your fair warning. You have about 30 seconds left. At 3 minutes, that clock stops ticking and the stop sign appears, and a whistle blows, and you are done. Son, no further remarks are allowed after 3 minutes have elapsed. We will show our appreciation even if you're in mid-sentence, I assure you. As usual in these competitions, our esteemed judges' decisions will be final. Now, as you all watch the presentations, keep in mind that the students are being judged according to identified criteria, and these are actually on the mark sheets that the judges are using. First, communication style. Was the thesis topic and its significance communicated in language appropriate to an intelligent but non-specialist audience, which I said earlier is the opposite of a non-intelligent specialist audience. Comprehension. Did the presentation help the audience understand the research? Self-explanatory. And thirdly, engagement. Did the oration make the audience want to know more? We hope that you will pay keen attention to these presentations, because I keep looking at this side of the room, but in fact all of you are invited to participate in this by voting for the People's Choice Award. The ballots for this award, if you don't already have them, are available on the desk at the door, and I think there might even be some over here as well. I could be corrected about that. And you are allowed to write in your favorite. We'll tally the scores for all of these following the last presentation. We'll invite you to a brief reception, and then we'll announce the winners. For those of you voting in People's Choice, please put your ballots in that glass box, that plexiglass box there at the side table. This event is being streamed live, so anybody can watch from anywhere in the world. We'd like to thank IT, Media, and Classroom Services for their brilliant assistance and support for the Research Rodeo. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. What do you say we get started? Good idea? Okay, let's get started. Your first ever Research Rodeo graduate student presenter is Kayla Cornett. Kayla's supervisor is Dr. Jennifer Jacoby. Her topic is the evaluation of motor units in functional tasks and anisometric contractions. Kayla.
Imagine taking a sip of coffee and missing your mouth or spilling it all over your shirt. Without the ability to control our movements, functional daily tasks would become near impossible. This control becomes increasingly important as we age, as it is well known that with aging comes a decline in the ability to perform functional tasks. This forces older adults to become dependent upon others. Understanding how these muscle contractions are controlled will help us to design rehabilitation protocols to prolong functional independence. Voluntary muscle contractions are controlled throughout the central and peripheral nervous systems, beginning at the brain, moving through the spinal cord, and ending at the motor unit. A motor unit consists of a motor neuron, which originates in the spinal cord and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates. By measuring motor unit action potentials in the muscle, we gain a direct representation of spinal activity, as it is not practical to insert needles into the spinal cord of human beings. Inserting fine wire electrodes, shown here in the muscle, allows us to measure motor unit recruitment and discharge rate, which are two of the means by which movement is controlled by the motor unit. Motor unit recruitment is the force at which motor units are activated. At lower force levels, fewer motor units are required to complete a contraction. However, as the contraction continues or the required force increases, more motor units must be recruited. Motor unit discharge is the time interval between consecutive action potentials. These motor unit recordings are very technically challenging and time-consuming. We are one of a few laboratories in Canada with the ability and expertise to conduct this type of research, and the only laboratory to be evaluating functional tasks. Other labs evaluate isometric contractions in which the subject's limb is immobile, as depicted in this picture here, or simple dynamic contractions, such as a biceps contraction performed in the following manner. These do not represent the complexity of functional tasks, so it is unlikely that the control processes are the same between these various types of contractions. The purpose of my study is to evaluate motor unit activity in two types of contractions: pouring a glass of water from a jug, a functional task, and a simple dynamic contraction, a biceps contraction, which is a lab-based control contraction. Both of these contractions will require the same force to complete, so differences observed in motor unit activity can be attributed to differences in spinal control. Results to date indicate that the results are different, with motor unit recruitment occurring earlier and discharge rate being higher in the functional tasks. Overall, not only is my research novel in this area, but I aim to discover critical aspects of spinal control in voluntary movements.
I'll give the judges a moment to collect their thoughts. I didn't hear the whistle. It's okay. Just giving me a hard time. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you very much. Is everybody comfortable? Does everybody have a ballot for the People's Choice Award? Okay. While they're putting their thoughts together, I will welcome to the stage our next presenter, who is Shirley Hutchinson, who works with Supervisor Dr. Paul G. Davies. Her title is Eyewitness Recall of Perceived Stereotypicality. Welcome, Shirley.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. Today I'm going to be talking to you about eyewitness identification errors. Eyewitness identification errors play a large role in our criminal justice system, but unfortunately, research to date has focused on when these errors are likely to occur, so before or after a crime, rather than who is likely to be misidentified. Before I discuss the images that I have on the slide, I'd like to introduce two concepts to you. One is perceived black stereotypicality, or PBS. Perceived black stereotypicality is the degree to which a person is physically representative of the black racial stereogroup. So you might wonder what that looks like. Well, that will include skin tone, nose width, and lip thickness. So I'd like to direct your attention to the top image I have, the low PBS condition. That is someone who has a lighter skin color, a thinner nose, and thinner lips than someone on the high perceived black stereotypicality condition. Now, I'd also like to introduce the concept of the contextual model of eyewitness identification. This model suggests that crime type activates racial stereotypes for a perpetrator, which then have an influence on our eyewitness memory of the perceived stereotypicality for that perpetrator. So now I'd like to discuss my design. What you're looking at here is you're looking at a between subjects design. Our IV had two levels for crime type: drive-by shooting and serial killing. Now, it's important to recognize that pre-testing conditions determine that drive-by shooting is a highly stereotypic black crime and serial killing is a highly stereotypic white crime. Now, as you can see on the other side, we have our DV, which is the recalled perceived black stereotypicality. This is a continuous measure from 0 to 100. Participants were asked to stop a video that was morphing from low perceived black stereotypicality to high perceived black stereotypicality when they felt that the target best represented the image they had in their head from the video. So what did our results show? Well, it was awesome. They confirmed our hypothesis, which is exactly what we were looking for. So participants recalled the target to be significantly higher on perceived black stereotypicality when they saw a highly stereotypic black crime than when they saw a highly stereotypic white crime. Now, it's really important to consider that this was true even though participants never actually saw the target commit a crime or even had the two conditions were exactly the same. So they watched the same surveillance video, and all that differed was one was a stereotypically black crime and one was a stereotypically white crime. Now, you can look behind me, you can see the middle picture, that's Cameron. He was our target that was in the surveillance video, and he is at a perceived black stereotypicality level of a 50. So participants are still rating him higher when they see a highly stereotypic black crime. So what are the implications of this? Well, the best implication is that if individuals are applying the racial stereotypes to people that they see and what type of person commits what type of crime, then we can actually understand how these errors take place. So right now I'm looking at victim types to try and explain this crime type issue more, but the biggest thing is that if we can find a way to ensure that the perpetrators who are truly responsible are the ones that are held accountable rather than people who just look like they should be, we'll be making great works. Thank you, and thank you, judges.
One of our contestants earlier today told me a joke. The joke was a neutron walks into a bar and asks for a drink. The bartender serves a drink. The neutron says, "How much does that cost?" The bartender says, "For you, no charge." I won't tell you whether or not the person who told me that joke won this morning, but it's another story altogether. Next, we would like to introduce to you Roberta Dick, whose supervisor is Dr. Rehan Sadiq. Roberta's topic is Exposure and Risk Assessment for Disinfection by Products in Swimming Pools, Risk Management and Policy Development. Roberta.
Thank you. No one wants to swim in dirty water. Have you ever been at a public swimming pool and looked across the room to see someone getting into the pool and wondered, when is the last time that person showered? Have you ever been sitting in a hot tub when the jets come on and looked around and thought, what is that foam? We depend on disinfection of swimming pool water to keep us safe from things like bacteria, viruses, and parasites that people bring into the swimming pool with them. And swimming pools are well regulated and maintained to do just that. But disinfection has a darker side. You may have seen in the news this week, in Vancouver, there was a school that was evacuated because of a chlorine leak in a swimming pool. About a week and a half ago in Williams Lake, 70 people were sent to the hospital because of a chlorine leak in the public pool. Chlorine can be a very dangerous chemical, but not just by itself. When we add chlorine to swimming pool water, it reacts with the organic matter in the water. Things like skin, sweat, urine, other secretions react with the chlorine and generate unwanted byproducts. We call them disinfection byproducts. To date, researchers have found over 600 different kinds of disinfection byproducts. Chloroform is one of them. Some of them have been linked to serious health effects, like skin and eye irritation, asthma, reproductive effects, and even some forms of cancer. In order to reduce the health risks, we need to understand how swimmers are exposed. There are three main ways that disinfection byproducts enter the body. Dermal contact is absorption through the skin. Ingestion occurs when we accidentally swallow pool water. And inhalation occurs when disinfection byproducts evaporate out of the pool into the air above the water where swimmers breathe it in. In my research, I've developed a model that helps us to predict the total exposure dose from all three of the exposure routes. The next thing I'm doing with my research is to use this model to help evaluate the effectiveness of risk management strategies so that we can reduce the health risk. There are 36 million visits to swimming pools in Canada each month. That's a lot of people. And there are no guidelines to limit the amount of disinfection byproducts that exist in swimming pools. In advancing my research, we're looking towards developing guidelines to do that so that we can balance the protection that we get from disinfection with the health risks that occur because of disinfection byproducts. So we're working towards everyone having clean water to swim in. Thank you. Thank you.
Suddenly I feel like I need a shower. Strangely enough. Thank you very much, Roberta. Our judges are busily making their notes while I am preparing to welcome to the stage David Kadish, who works with supervisors Dr. Homayoun Najaran and Dr. Alexandra Dulich on the automatic computer recognition of facial expressions. David.
So, I'm excited to be here. Or am I? In fact, I actually am quite excited to be here, but the point that I was trying to make is that facial expressions are important. My words said that I was excited, but my face indicated, well, maybe not so much. So there's a big problem, though, because a lot of our companions can't understand our facial expressions right now. I'm talking, of course, about our technologies. You probably spend more time with your phone than you do with your parents, but your phone can't understand when you're upset. That's all about to change. In the next 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you how I'm trying to get computers to recognize facial expressions and what I hope to do with that. The first thing to remember is that computers think very differently than we do. They think in numbers. If we want to get computers to analyze facial expressions, we need to turn those facial expressions into numbers. And that's what's being done in that image up to the right. We use tracking software to locate certain sets of points on faces. And computers can then analyze that and look at things like the distance between points and the motion of those points in video. For the next step, we turn to psychology. Psychology defines a set of facial motions called action units that roughly correspond to the motion of facial muscles. The computers can track the motion of the dots that you see up there and decide which action units it sees in a scene. We can then program computers to understand that combinations of those action units form expressions. So why do we want to do this? Well, beyond, say, making sure that your camera only takes pictures when people are smiling, and making sure that your music that your computer is playing matches your mood. Well, one of the things that we like to think of is computers as conduits for emotion. So a colleague and I are working on a system right now that uses a camera to measure the facial expressions of people that you're interacting with. Then it takes those facial expressions and it generates a set of music to match those expressions that it then plays back to you, so you can have a better understanding of what people around you are thinking. We also like to think about being able to use computers to convey context in less expressive modes of communication, such as instant messaging and email. I can even imagine a situation in the near future where I'm about to send a particularly pernicious email to my boss, and my phone says to me, "Look, David, I can see that you're really upset about this. I honestly think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over. Thank you."
Very interesting, David. Thank you. My phone reminds me not to sit on it quite so much. There's a little built-in air horn effect. I would like to invite to the stage Sarah Helland, whose supervisor is Dr. Alwyn Spies. Her topic is role play models, ethics and morality in contemporary digital role-playing games. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Until very recently, the field of video game studies, yes, that is a field, has been mired in debates surrounding research methodology. A schism has emerged between ludologists such as Jesper Juhl, Espen Arseth, and Mark Wolf, who contend that video games should be studied purely in terms of gameplay, and narratologists such as Henry Jenkins and Janet Murray, who assert that narrative is key in understanding the significance of video games in global cultures. The debate between ludologists and narratologists began shortly after the establishment of video game studies and has in many ways crippled scholars' ability to adequately determine how video games are experienced by most players. In the last 5 years, many researchers in the field, such as David Clearwater, Margaret Mackey, and Jeff King, have urged a more holistic approach to studying video games, which includes examination of both gameplay and narrative. Through my research on digital role-playing games, or RPGs, I intend to aid in the field's progression beyond the ludology versus narratology debate by examining the ways in which gameplay and narrative intersect. Among video game genres, RPGs are characterized by their strong focus on narrative. One of the central focal points in an RPG is the completion of a predetermined story arc, which usually includes narrative conventions found in both novels and films. Despite this fact, the RPG genre has been almost entirely ignored in academic works exploring narrative in video games. It is for this reason that I have chosen to perform textual analyses of 3 popular RPGs, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, Persona 4, and Tales of Symphonia: Dawn of the New World. All 3 games are single-player and include strictly linear plotlines. However, the games differ significantly in terms of narrative themes. Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn is centralized on themes of ethical war practices, Persona 4 contains a strong commentary on morality in contemporary visual media, and Tales of Symphonia: Dawn of the New World includes a central theme of the construction of the self in relation to the other. Gameplay likewise varies drastically between the 3 titles, ranging from turn-based strategy gameplay that resembles gameplay in chess, to real-time arcade-style gameplay that favors quick reflexes and hand-eye coordination. In studying games which contain such differences, I intend to examine the ways in which different notions of morality are constructed and articulated to the player through gameplay and narrative. My research is by necessity interdisciplinary. Utilizing a formalist approach and methodology, I am incorporating narrative genre and cultural theory into my analyses, as well as the works of contemporary writers in video game studies. By providing textual analyses which highlight the various ways in which narrative and gameplay intersect, I intend to put into practice the holistic research methodologies suggested by writers such as Clearwater, Mackey, and King. In doing so, I hope to aid in suturing the divide that has emerged between ludology and narratology in game studies, and ultimately to contribute meaningfully to this emerging field's progression. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So a woman I know has a job for a secretary. She puts an ad in the paper, nothing happens. She hears a noise. She goes to the door, there's a small dog there that wants to apply for the job. She can't possibly give the job to the dog. She just decides to test it to disqualify it. She says, you have to do the filing. Dog goes and does the filing. She says, you have to do the typing. Dog goes and does the typing. You have to answer the phone. The dog goes over and answers the phone. That's a tricky one, but it's a joke. Just bear with me. She says, I can't give this job to a dog. So she looks at the job description right at the bottom of the list. It says, must be proficient in both official languages. She looks at the dog. I got you. You must be proficient in both official language. Dog goes, meow. I'm just making time here for the judges to finish their notes. I would like to welcome to the stage a much better performer than I am, Gabriel Newman, whose supervisor is Neil Cadger in the Department of Creative Studies. Gabriel will now tell us about his project, Social Potluck. Gabriel.
Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, judges, and academics. My name is Gabriel Newman. I'm a Master's of Fine Arts student in my 3rd year. For the last 2 years, I've been working on my research, which I call Social Potluck. And Social Potluck is a structure for creating community-engaged, interactive performance projects. And the premise, the basic belief behind Social Potluck is that the most important performance venue we have as a society isn't film, isn't television, isn't the stage, it's the dinner table. It's where we learned who we are, and we continue to reinforce that. And we do that through an art form that we all practice, storytelling. Now, Thomas King said that the truth about stories is that that's all we are. We're not our objects, we're not our job titles, we're not our possessions. We are just a ball of walking stories. And if you think about it that way, well, what is our community then? But just a collection of stories that all happen to be together at one given time. And what that community is changes depending on who you talk to. So, Social Potluck is a structure in 2 acts. Act 1, I hold a series of 5 dinners for 5 people. I feed people for free in exchange for a story. And we all share the story at the same time around the table, essentially creating our own micro-community play. Then for Act 2, I take all of those stories and I turn it into a larger performance, a performance that I invite all the participants back to, along with a guest of their choice. Now, it is free to attend this performance, but they are asked to bring a dish of food to share with everybody else. And we have a giant potluck performance and potluck dinner, all mingled together for one large celebration of that community that happened to exist in that one time period. Now, I should mention that social potluck isn't content. It is a structure for celebrating the content that already exists within each and every one of us and within our community. And so no two shows are ever the same, but it is a celebration of what happens when we all sit down to eat. And I hope you think about that the next time you sit down with your friends and family. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Our jurors are, I can smell the wheels spinning. I'm asking to prepare herself Michelle Stanley, whose supervisors are Doctors Ruth Frost and Julian Vernet. Michelle is going to speak to us about Mary Wollstonecraft, Lady of Liberty. Please welcome Michelle.
Good afternoon. I study history and philosophy for 2 reasons. First of all, the stories, the people, the places, and the events. You can't get better than that. But secondly, and for me more compelling, are investigations into the question, what ideas are still going around that had their beginnings long ago? Ideas that are still fueling our debates, our politics, and our beliefs. In a nutshell, since that's all the time I have, I'm intrigued by the life and writings of Mary Wollstonecraft, an 18th century British woman, because she examined ideas of liberty, proposed ways of thinking about freedom that are still relevant today. In fact, the more I dig into her life and writings, the more I feel a connection between the issues she grappled with and the issues we face today regarding liberty, rights, and how to implement those on a global scale. Unfortunately, many of the textbooks and anthologies that I've encountered during my education still focus mainly on the historical contributions made by men to these discussions. For me, Mary Wollstonecraft is important because she's one of the women who contributed to these discussions as well. And it's important that we remember that our intellectual roots include women. Mary Wollstonecraft's writings, particularly her Vindication of the Rights of Men and Vindication of the Rights of Women, explored freedom. Her idea of freedom was not only the idea of non-interference that has become associated with John Stuart Mill, but rather she included ideas of positive liberty. That is, she realized that people needed something more in order to use their freedom from interference. For her, education was paramount. It wasn't enough that you simply were allowed to go to school. You needed an actual school to go to. You needed the means to attend. And the school needed to be such that people could learn critical thinking skills. She recognized that to be independent, autonomous, free, required something, not just the absence of external restrictions. What is so intriguing to me about this aspect of Wollstonecraft's writings is that she anticipates the debates that became increasingly prominent in the 20th century regarding the role of government and communities in providing opportunities for people to become autonomous, to fully actualize their individual agency. In fact, she anticipates arguments put forward by the Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor that without the means of acting on one's liberty, one could not be free. This is what Wollstonecraft was discussing and why she focused on education. Without access to good education, how could people learn to think? And without knowing how to think, how could they be active agents in their own lives? It's important for us today, and this is why I'm researching her, to recognize the contributions made to this discussion that we're still dealing with now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm reminded that what we're in the company of here today, and I'm addressing myself to these other folks behind the hot seats here, is the production of new knowledge. And it's really quite exciting. This is new stuff. And I salute you for producing it and putting it into discourse, generally speaking. I think our judges are ready, so we'll move on to our next presenter, Jocelyn Madeira, who works with Supervisor Dr. Andis Klegeris. Jocelyn's talk is about gold compounds and your brain, or an often as a neuroprotective and anti-neuroinflammatory molecule. Jocelyn.
Alzheimer's disease, stroke, fetal alcohol disorder. What do all of these conditions have in common? Neuroinflammation, or inflammation of the brain. Nearly 1 in 4 Canadians will be affected by neuroinflammation, though none of them will be treated for it. How can this be? Well, if you think about inflammation in your body, it's something you're aware of. If you've ever sprained your wrist or cut your finger, there was that one indicator that let you know that something was going wrong. Pain. Ouch! It hurt. Unfortunately, in the brain, we do not have the receptors to detect the pain of inflammation, and therefore, we do not know to treat it. So, if we can't feel it, I mean, who cares? What's the big deal? Well, neuroinflammation is a big deal because it causes the loss of neurons. These are the cells in your brain responsible for your thoughts, for your memories. Neurons are the cells that keep you alive. And what causes this inflammation is actually the support cells of the brain. Normally, support cells are good guys. They provide neurons with nutrients, and they act as the immune system for the brain. But under certain disease conditions, these good guys become bad guys. After exposure to amyloid beta protein in Alzheimer's or alcohol in children with fetal alcohol disorder, these support cells become activated, and they start secreting toxins. And these toxins are going to kill the healthy neurons in your brain. But to make matters worse, the death of these neurons is going to feed back and activate even more support cells. So what you're having is a chronic cycle of support cell activation and neuronal death, and this is going to continue in these diseases long after the original stimulus is gone. There is no cure for neuroinflammation. Common anti-inflammatories like Advil are not effective. Some of these disorders result in dementia by the end of the disease. This is a big deal, so I'm looking for a treatment. And in particular, I focus on a class of gold compounds used in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. Oranophine in particular is what I focus on. And to give you a comparison of potency, Advil blocks one inflammatory pathway. Oranophine blocks that same pathway and another 5 along with it. It's much more potent. And when I put it into my model, I see 2 really cool things. If I treat support cells with Oranophine, they secrete less toxins and kill less neurons. They stop the inflammation from support cells. But better yet, if I treat my neurons with Oranophine and then stress them, they survive better. This dual action, both stopping the inflammation and protecting your neurons, makes Oranophine an excellent candidate for the treatment of neuroinflammation. And for 1 in 4 Canadians, I hope to one day say that Oranophine was our golden ticket out of neuroinflammation. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Jocelyn. Pamela Black works with supervisors Drs. Stephen Porter and Michael Woodworth. Pamela is going to speak to us today about the Dark Triad and Cues to Vulnerability, which is not a sequel to Harry Potter, I assure you. Pamela, welcome to the stage.
Hi there. So, as was just said, my name is Pamela Black, and I'm a master's student in the Forensic Psychology program. And I'm here to talk to you today about my thesis, which, as you can see, is titled The Dark Triad and Cues to Vulnerability. So you might be wondering, what is the Dark Triad? It sounds pretty ominous. Well, it actually is. So the Dark Triad is made up of 3 personality constructs. As you can see up here, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. These constructs are considered aversive because people who have and possess these constructs are likely to be selfish, they possess a very grandiose sense of self, and they're emotionally cold. Pretty much they're out for themselves, and they're willing to do anything, including manipulation and exploitation of others, to get what they want. So who are the people that they're victimizing? For every crime, there's a victim. So victims themselves actually have a similar set of personality constructs. These include things like low levels of assertiveness, a high willingness to trust others, and high levels of anxiety and depression. So in a word, they're very vulnerable. So we've looked into previous research, and it shows that psychopaths and other offenders, like sex offenders, are actually able to look at pictures and short videos of people simply walking down the street and pick out vulnerability in others, which is pretty scary. So what I wanted to know was whether all of the 3 personality constructs that are associated with exploitation would be better able to pick out vulnerability in others. We went about doing this by first having psychology students through the SONA program fill out a number of personality assessments for personality constructs related to vulnerability, as I said, like assertiveness and trustworthiness. Then we determined students who were very high in vulnerability and very low in vulnerability and brought them back into the lab to test. Or actually, we made videos, of them speaking about themselves for 1 minute. Then we brought in a new set of participants and showed these videos to the participants for a minute, and we showed them 8 of them and asked them to pick out whether people were vulnerable and assess the personality and emotional traits associated with vulnerability in the individuals in the videos. We are actually still in the process of collecting data, so I don't have any concrete results to tell you about today, but we do have a number of predicted findings that I'm really excited to share with you. It seems that individuals who are high in levels of all 3 dark triad traits have an increased ability to detect emotional and personality traits associated with vulnerability in others. In addition, based on the previous research that showed that people can watch videos and use the nonverbal cues to detect vulnerability, we believe that all participants will be better able to detect vulnerability in others based on the nonverbal cues as opposed to linguistic cues. We are very excited about this research, mainly because there are many social implications, mainly being that we can change the ways that we advise people to protect themselves from becoming the victims of crime with an increased knowledge of what makes them vulnerable to crime.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Just going to remind everyone, you do have an opportunity to vote for your personal favorite in one of the ballots that go into the People's Choice Award bin on your right. I would like to welcome to the stage next Emily Lanninga, who works with the anthropology program's Dr. Naomi McPherson. Emily's talk today is entitled Symbolism and Meaning in Temples and Shrines of Kyoto, Japan. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you. No matter which cultural background you are a part of, each and every one of us use symbolic expression as a way of portraying and understanding cultural meaning. Simply put, a symbol is one thing that stands for or represents another. While a physical form of one symbol may share characteristics by 2 or more other cultures, their meaning or the reasoning behind them are often different due to the fact that symbols are culturally determined. Furthermore, within a single culture, symbols are often polysemic, that is, they have many meanings. And meanings can be drawn in not only visually, but also through the other senses as well: sound, touch, smell, and even sometimes taste. My fieldwork research was conducted in the city of Kyoto, which boasts having more than 2,000 temples and shrines. And my thesis examines the variety of ways that Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples act as multifaceted outlets of symbolic expression and meaning. Many of the locations that I have visited do share some symbolic forms or even similarities in meanings. However, on the other hand, some sites have also created and developed their own distinctive forms of customs and meanings. So then, just how is symbolic meaning being depicted throughout temple shrines and shrine sites? During my research, I found 2 main categories of symbolic representation: objects and actions, which are also sometimes interconnected. Objects are physical, material artifacts that are representatives of something, such as architecture, artwork, statues and monuments, or talisman. Actions take place as a physical means of representing something and are acted out in order to initiate a desired effect. And this happens through acts such as ritual behaviors, ceremony, dance, and even offerings to deities. Interestingly, evidence in my data is emerging that shows there is a gap in symbolic knowledge that exists between different generations. This indicates that symbolic meaning is either changing in present days, or possibly that younger generations are not even learning these symbolic meanings in the first place. I've also observed that in many cases, members of the younger generations are visiting locations for different reasons than their elders, such as for sightseeing or entertainment purposes. This could be a factor that leads to them not receiving messages portrayed by these means. My research is of particular importance in view of the fact that as elements of mainstream Japanese culture continue to shift in contemporary times, people are most likely shifting components in their cultural use of symbolic knowledge that is derived from temples and shrines as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Our next presenter is Mohammed Alemi, whose supervisors are Dr. Abbas Melani and Spiro Yanakopoulos in engineering. Mohammed's talk is Impact Characterization and Modeling of Composite Laminates. Welcome to the stage, Mohammed.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to present my work here for you today. Unfortunately, I have to start my presentation with a very bad and sad story that lots of accidents happens on the roads and they end to the death of the people. And the reason is that we are not making a strong material to save the life of the people, okay? So as an engineer, I looked at the parameters that may affect and we can affect this problem. And I found that the safety of the highway features, like the guardrail that you can see here on the photo, is one of the factors that allow the car to go off the road and may cause a death of the people. So that's why I started to work on finding a new material which can absorb enough energy to be strong enough to stop this problem, okay? So with my industrial partners, National Research Council in Montreal, and also a company which makes composite materials, we found a material which is a kind of composite material with a thermoplastic resins, and which is reinforced with some glass fibers. And we found that this material can be a good candidate to absorb enough energy. So we worked on this material and we made about 200 different configurations that may be the best possible configuration. We ran 200 impact tests and we came up with a very, very strong material that can be a good candidate for the highway guardrails as a new material instead of the steel that now we are using. Okay, so for now we have found the best configuration, the best material, but we don't know about the best shape of the feature. So for now we are using the WB materials. But what we are trying to analyze and optimize the shape of the feature as well, and we're hopeful that we make a very, very strong material for, and we introduce the new the composite guardrail for everybody around the world in the next few months, actually, or maybe next year. I'm very hopeful. So for now, we are modeling on the new with the numerical softwares to analyze, to simulate the impact test and then optimize it to find the best structure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohammed. Variety is the spice of life. I mean, it's really interesting to see the range of things that are possible on this campus for research. I don't think there's any sharper illustration than to move from composite laminates to the role of intestinal microbes in type 1 diabetes. But I'd like to welcome Kirsty Brown to the stage. Kirsty works with supervisor Dr. Deanna Gibson and will speak about exactly that. Kirsty.
Thank you. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. It's caused when immune cells in your body attack your insulin-secreting cells in the pancreas. So this causes a complete lack of insulin. Without insulin, people with this condition can't uptake sugars from their bloodstream into cells, and so it leads to a host of metabolic problems and ultimately would lead to death if not treated. So it's commonplace now to treat individuals with type 1 diabetes with exogenous injections of insulin. So you can see this first picture is showing one of the first children treated with insulin. And so you can see after a few months of insulin treatment, he looks like a normal, healthy child. But what's important to remember is that insulin does nothing to treat the underlying disease. It only treats the symptoms of the disease. So there is no cure for type 1 diabetes. It was originally thought that type 1 diabetes was a genetic condition, but there's been a steady increase in this disease over the past 50 years. And so we've looked to some more environmental factors. So in terms of type 1 diabetes research, the gastrointestinal tract has been a focus area, and this is partly due to the close connection between the gut and the pancreas. So in this picture, you can see the pancreas in yellow, the colon in green, and the small intestine in orange. So you can see these structures are located very closely together. Within the gastrointestinal tract is the intestinal microbiota, which is the collection of viruses, fungi, and bacteria that reside in your gastrointestinal tract. So at birth, we're sterile, and then we're colonized by these microbes in the first few years of life, depending on environmental conditions. And some things that contribute to the composition of our intestinal flora is method of delivery, whether vaginal or cesarean section. Also, whether you're breast or bottle fed as an infant. It's also been shown that diet and medications can influence the composition of your intestinal microbiota. So what's interesting is that the incidence of type 1 diabetes has been increasing in the past 50 years, and these things that contribute to our intestinal microbiota composition have also changed. So we've seen more cesarean sections, an increase in bottle feeding, and there's been a huge shift in diet from natural to more processed foods. And we've also seen an increased use in medications. So these things that contribute to the flora are changing at a similar rate to the incidence of type 1 diabetes. So in the lab, we're trying to draw a connection between these changes in intestinal microbiota and incidence of type 1 diabetes. So to do this, we have 2 strains of mice that get diabetes and mice that don't get diabetes. And so what we're looking at is the composition of the flora in these 2 sets of mice. And so what we've found so far is that the diabetic mice have decreased levels of these green bacteria, so those are good bacteria, and they have increased levels of the red bacteria, or these bad bacteria. And so my master's research is looking at switching the flora between the diabetes susceptible and diabetes resistant mice and seeing what happens in terms of disease progression. So with this, we hope to tie some kind of link between the intestinal microbes and this increased incidence of type 1 diabetes. Thank you.
I had no idea my entrails were so colorful, but I'm very pleased to know it. That is officially the end of our undergraduate presentation, so I'd like to invite you to join me in thanking all of these student competitors. It's really wonderful and stimulating. It really is. Well done. I'd like to offer special thanks to all of the students, to our judges, of course, to our timekeeper, and to our other volunteers who are tabulating the scores, which we will announce to you in a very few minutes. In the meantime, I'd like to invite you to go to the back of the room where we have refreshments set up. Don't go anywhere, because in about, 5 or 10 minutes or so, we'll announce the top 3 presenters and the People's Choice Award. If you haven't filled out your ballot yet, please do so. And we will continue with our research radio. Thank you so much. All right, folks, let's reconvene so I can give the happy news. Boy, I wish I could get my classes in the morning to do that. Well, the judges' scores have been counted, and your ballots are in as well, so we have some winners to announce. The winning students will receive their awards during the Research Awards Gala, which is tomorrow at 2 a.m., so I'd like to invite all the contestants to attend the Celebrate Research Gala, 2 p.m., ADM 026, which is the lecture theater under the sunroom. And if you're a winner, be there or be square, as they say. It's a pleasure to announce the names of 3 recipients of $125 each as the top 3 research rodeo presenters of the first ever graduate research rodeo. In no particular order, I invite you to join me in congratulating David Kadish, Gabriel Newman, and Jocelyn Madeira. Please come on up. Come on up. Right here. We're going to get the official portrait made right now. There you go. Say intestinal microflora. Now I'd like to ask those three don't disappear because Sue Ann would like to have a word with you afterwards. But please take your seats because now we're going to announce the People's Choice winner. That is an award of $75 and of course bragging rights. I am very pleased to announce that the People's Choice Award goes to Jocelyn Madeira. Come on up and take a bow. You're the best, you're the brightest, you're going to change the world. I'm very proud of all of you. Thank you all for being here, in fact. This completes the Research Rodeo Graduate Student Competition. It has genuinely been my pleasure to learn about the work of our students and what they're doing to advance the fields of exploration that are so varied and so stimulating. Let's give the students one last round of applause.